Hey, Luke here. In this video we're going to be going through running your bar and lines and connecting them to your kite upwind. So there are a couple of different ways that you can run your lines out. Basically you can run them out in any direction depending on your sort of area and obstacles and your beach and how much space you have and how many other kites. I mean, there are a lot of different variables. However, the two main methods that are discussed typically are running your lines downwind and running them upwind. And so in this video, we're going to go through how you can set that up upwind to make sure you don't have any mistakes, create that little system for yourself, and you know that when you're connecting your lines to your kite, everything's going to be great. You can launch it without, worrying that there's some sort of twist in the lines or anything like that. So to get started, I've already pumped the kite up. First thing I like to do is just secure the kite, so put some sand on there. As you can see, it's really light wind today, so the kite's not going to go anywhere, but it's good practice to get into so that when you're running your lines it's not going to slide around, particularly on hard packed sand. Sometimes the kite's more likely to move. So to run your lines upwind, I like to start on the wingtip. I'll just move the bag. I like to start at the back of the wingtip. I can feel the wind in my face, so I know that that's the direction that we're going to be walking. We collect all, just undo the bungees if you have bungees. Collect all 4 lines in your hand. Like I said, we start at the wingtip here. On just either side, you can choose a side, and then we're going to start walking the bar and lines out. Now, we're not shaking the bar out like this, and we're not holding the bar upside down so all the lines are falling off. We're literally holding the bar like this and placing them as we go. Another thing we want to just keep an eye on is that we're not dragging all of the lines behind us, so we're moving away from the kite, but instead we're just placing them down as we walk. Now, once we get to the end of the bar, you want to put the bar down how you would use to ride it. So this is probably one of the main reasons that I do like running my lines upwind, is that you place the bar down exactly how you're going to pick it up. So reds are going to be on the left, and you can pull your chicken loop rope out, have the whole thing set up exactly how you like to ride. If you have any preferences on how this sits, then you do all that right now so you know it's all ready to go. Then I like to pick up the 2 outside lines and have the 2 center lines between my legs, but at the moment I'm just holding the 2 outside lines. And then we start to walk forward. Eventually you're going to reach a point where they're all sort of caught together, and what I like to do then is, you can see I've divided it on my body. So I've got the 2 outside lines on the outside of my body, and then the 2 center lines are just running through my legs, but I'm not worried about separating them. They're just literally in between my legs, and we can start to walk forward. You can actually use a hand in front of you to sort of slide up the lines, and you might find that that actually helps separate them as you walk. So you can just give them a little jiggle. One of the other nice things about running your lines upwind like we're doing is when you're untangling them like right now, you're actually walking downwind, and the wind helps assist just to help untangle some of those lines, particularly when you get to the end. So you can see we're at the end, and the main thing to do here is that we're actually separating the outside lines. You can see that. So we're separating the outside lines from the center lines. They're the 2 that we picked up, and we just want to make sure that they're the ones that are separate like this. So first we sit down the line on the left, or whichever side you started on, and then we're going to take the other outside line and move it all the way the other side. So we walk it all the way over so we know that it's not in the way of any other line, and we can just sit it there waiting for when we're going to attach it. Next, and I like to do this every single time, I always go back to my bar for a second walk, and I do that to make sure that we're not going to have any mistakes. If you're self-launching a lot, then it's just so important to have this set up correctly every time, and so I always walk back. Some people just like to do it in one pass. because you can unswivel you know, the center lines, but that's not what I like to do. I always walk back to the bar because it also gives a second chance to make sure that these are not twisted or incorrectly set up with any of the other lines. Okay, so now they don't have any twists in them. We leave one on the inside there, so you can see that's separated, and then we take this other one over to the other side. And we'll sit that down there. Now, what we should be left with is all four lines separated. So we've got, you know, one back line on the side, the other one's on the other side, and the two center lines coming down. There's no crosses in them, there's no twists in them, and they're all sitting down. At this point, I like to actually pull out the bridles. So you can see this one's actually already half pulled out. So if you couldn't see it though, you just reach underneath, pull that out so you know the whole bridle's been pulled out. And what's really important here is that there's no twist in the bridle, so you pull it all the way out, make sure it's working, make sure there's no twists. All right, if you see anything like this, you've got to get that out now. All looks good. We've got a loop on this one, and we're going to put this center line, the knot through the loop, and tighten it up. If you have multiple knots, it's really important. The main thing anyway is that you have it the same setup on both sides so the kite doesn't steer itself or do anything unusual. So now we've got this center line done, we're going to move back to the other side and do the center line on that side. So you can see we can't see the bridle here. So we'll reach underneath, pull that out. There we go. So make sure it's all pulled out. It's moving. There's no problems with it. So we're going to connect this center line. And that's all connected. Now, with this particular kite, it's sort of idiot proof where there's knots on the center lines and loops on the outside lines so that you can't connect the outside line to the center line or vice versa. Your kite might have something similar. A lot of kite brands do that. They're color coded or something like that. And so it's just take note of that and make sure that it's set up correctly. So now that we've got our center lines set up, we know we can grab our outside lines and connect it to the back. So what's important to note here is that you can sight down there. I can see that that is not twisted with any other line. It's completely free, which means that I can bring it over here and connect it to here, knowing that it's not going to interfere with this line. So even though it might just accidentally drape over that center line for a moment, I know it's completely free and clear as I connect it to the outside here. Okay, and we'll do the same for the other side. Again, you can have a quick visual, make sure it's nice and easy on a big open sandy beach like this. Sometimes it's really hard to see this, so that's another reason why you walk back twice, just to make sure it's right. Connect this one up, loop goes over the knot, pull it up nice and tight. Make sure it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so now we know that we've got all of our lines connected to the kite. There's a couple of little things that it's worth just remembering when it comes down to running your lines upwind, that it's different to running them downwind. The first thing is, let's say that you've just connected yourself to the bar, you're about to go and launch, and you've asked me to help launch your kite. When you ask a helper, if I don't move anything, okay, if you haven't changed anything from this setup, and somebody, you're going to get in position, ready to launch, and you've asked someone to hold the kite or launch the kite for you, they come and they grab it like this, shake the sand off it, and then they roll it up into position. Now, you can see the lines on the ground here. The problem with that is, when you pull tension on those lines, there's a chance that that is going to be wrapped around the outside of the canopy. And you know, obviously we don't want that. That's not going to work, and it could cause major problems for your kite or be dangerous. So one way that we avoid that when we're running our lines upwind is, after we've set it all up, you just pull the kite forward a little bit so it's over the top of all of those lines, so that you know that it's not going to come over the front when somebody picks up your kite. The second thing to remember is that, and this is mainly for the helper, I mean it could affect you as well, but remember that we're upwind of our kite right now. And so if the kite was to roll over or launch, it would immediately be in the power zone. So it's important to remember that you need to take your bar and lines all the way across the wind window, get completely perpendicular with that, so that when you go to connect to the bar and there's some tension on the lines, you can then move upwind slightly until you see that canopy stop rippling, and then you can launch it. But it's really important because sometimes when your bar and lines are already upwind there, you're really excited to get on the water, and you know, somebody's going to help you launch and you don't remember to go all the way perpendicular to the wind. So that's another little point for running your lines upwind to keep yourself safe. That said, one of the reasons that I really like this method particularly is it's not always like this, you know? There's not always all this space around, and so sometimes it's really tight. There's all these kites lined up, and this way just makes more sense to me when I'm setting it up. The bar is set up correctly, red's on the left. I know that this is exactly how the kite flies. We had all of our lines set out, and if you just put the kite up in the air, that's exactly how it flies. And so sometimes in tricky little situations, lots of rocks and logs and trees, or really tight banks, or you know, all of the places that you might find yourself launching a kite, this just makes it a little bit clearer for me in the kite setup to make sure I'm not going to have any problems when I actually go to launch the kite. If I'm running my lines across the wind, for instance, because there's all these kites lined up at the beach, or again in a tight position. So that's one of the reasons that I really like it. Anyway, that's a lot of talking. Let's go get the kite in the air and see if it flies. Okay, so now we're connected to the bar, and this is our last chance to double check that all of that line setup was correct. You can imagine we've got an imaginary helper down there holding onto the kite. We can sight the lines, make sure they're not, you know, tangled with any lines, there's no crosses or twists, and then we should be ready to launch the kite. Now, the most important thing about the method that I just showed you in the video is that's what works for me. I do it that same way every single time so that I know there's not going to be any mistakes, and it's really important that you make your own little system as well. If you like to connect the outside lines first, or however you like to do it, just make sure you do it the same every time, so that when something does arise that makes it slightly confusing, like it is a crowded beach, or there is rocks and logs and trees in the way, you just know that you've done this dozens and dozens of times. You always do it the same way, it always works for you, and then that way you're not going to run into any problems. So anyway, let's see if the kite will launch. It's light winds, so we'll see if it'll come up. Oh, easy. Awesome, thanks for watching guys, we'll see you in coming videos.